Daniel the prophet in chapter 4 has confused the Christian world for hundreds of years when he tells King Nebuchadnezzar that his tree would not be completely destroyed, but the enemy of Babylon would have their tree destroyed. Since this never happened in Nebuchadnezzar's time, Daniel must be referring to the last days when the eagle's tree, the enemy of Babylon, is hewn down. The prophet declared, "Let the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thine enemies."
The Trade Center was an economic tree with branches and boughs, exactly as Daniel described it 2,500 years ago.
Nebuchadnezzar the king only dreamed that he grew eagle's wings, which represented his change of heart when he found God's deliverance. Only today can we look at the Gentiles in America and witness how literal the prophetic dream was fulfilled in our day. The Gentiles did grow eagle's wings and were given literal power over the fowls of heaven, flying above the eagles, even going to the moon, reaching the heavens, as Daniel prophesied. All these prophecies were sealed in Daniel's time and then unsealed today at the time of the end, when knowledge to do these things was increased.
Hew the tree down and destroy it, yet leave the stump and the roots thereof in the earth.
Just as 3 freedom-loving innocent men were cast into the fiery furnace, made several times hotter in Babylon, so were 3 American airlines filled with freedom-loving innocent people cast into a modern fiery furnace, made several times hotter because of the exploding jet fuel. So we have another perfect match with 3 American eagles, with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being forced into fiery furnaces.
When you look at this with an honest analysis, you will find that the author is perfectly following biblical context and not inventing his own ideas. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were all thrown into a furnace with their clothes. This is an obvious twin prophecy to the 3 planes which, full of people bound with their luggage, crashed into the World Trade Centers and Pentagon on September 11th.
Just as King Nebuchadnezzar dreamed of a symbolic stump representing fallen Babylon, bound with brass and iron,
so a huge stump made of iron and brass was all that was left of this fallen tree, witnessed by the whole world at ground zero. This stump becomes a sacred memorial where the roots are watered by the people's tears. Another perfect match with Daniel's ancient prophecy, which was to befall Babylon's enemy. A modern economic tree was hewn down to a memorial stump.
Could a prophet 2,500 years ago actually know that people who fly on modern jets would bind their clothing in luggage?
Here you have Bible prophecies all connecting the right dots in one context. Clearly, it goes beyond coincidence when you see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego cast into the fire after binding their clothes together like they were going on a trip with their luggage. Is Bible prophecy that accurate 2,500 years ago to make this perfect match on 9/11 with modern passengers bound inside their planes with their luggage, all being cast in the fiery furnace? We might as well name the 3 American jets Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Another interesting prophetic match for 9/11 is the king's assassins who threw Shadrach and the other 2 into the flames were themselves killed by the flames. They sacrificed their own lives to ensure the death of the other 3. Sound familiar? Surely we remember the modern assassins, the terrorists, who sacrificed their lives in the jet fuel flames to ensure the death of the hostages and the death of the eagle's economic power. What about the 4th man in the fire who showed up unexpectedly, who was like the Son of God? If 9/11 cannot show a 4th figure which somehow matches a description of Christ, then the rest of the clues are meaningless in a true prophecy. But there was a 4th plane which showed up unexpectedly also and sacrificed itself to save the lives of others. It was Flight 93. Yes, the fourth eagle came down to the earth from heaven and sacrificed itself like unto the Son of God. But just as we all remember from the news reports, the officials ran to Flight 93's crash site and found an empty hole. The reporter asked, "Where's the plane?" The fireman said, "I don't know, maybe you can help us find it." Flight 93 created an empty tomb.
When Flight 93 crashed, it left an empty hole. This is a perfect parallel to Christ in the empty tomb. The plane came down from heaven to earth to sacrifice itself for others. When the officials ran to the crash site, they found nothing but an empty tomb.
Remember, when they ran to Christ's tomb and found it empty? The parallels are beyond comprehension on 9/11.
To show you how real Bible prophecies work, look at Abraham, who was about to sacrifice his son Isaac.
Abraham and Isaac were an earlier type for the Father, allowing the sacrifice of his son Jesus. God fulfills true prophecies by like witnesses. You don't have a prophecy happen unless another type was modeled earlier in time, causing history to repeat itself in cycles. Prophecies are like chiasmus. You communicate something important, and then later on you repeat it again in reverse form. All of Daniel's prophecies are set up this way.
One prophetic event is recorded in history as a prophetic foundation. Many years later, history will repeat itself with a perfect type of a second parallel and seal the prophecy by a second witness of a like cycle.
Typical nature of prophecy. You may see a prophecy fulfilled that was in the Old Testament, that was fulfilled a few years later, and then decades later you may see the same prophecy fulfilled once again. And even hundreds of years later you see it being fulfilled again on a grander scale. That seems to be the cyclical nature of prophecy. And this is what Paul has found, and this is what he is tying to as he is creating not only just a scriptural cycle, but also a political cycle that ties to these scriptures.
I'm Ross David, and I have no explanation as to why 9/11 is in the Bible. If this discovery is true, it will be the first time anyone ever successfully linked Bible prophecy to our day.
Thousands of our citizens. I can hear you! I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon. A modern Bush type, who represented the greatest eagle on earth, was President George Bush, who wielded authority over the great eagle wings in the last days. After he spoke on the stump at Ground Zero, his approval grew to 90%. That historical speech for a time united one nation under God. Bush's presidency and leadership became an eternal legacy, for the name Bush burned into America's history forever.
Why would God leave a clue like that in the Bible for no reason? That was not an accident made by Daniel. That clue was intentionally pointing to Iraq's transformation involving a future Bush. George Bush is freeing Iraq today. The Bible is real.
I'm very skeptical about things I hear, but I've never seen anything that makes more sense than this.
Even though Nebuchadnezzar and George Bush are mortals who make mistakes, they both are used for God's purposes. God takes a burning branch from a bush which came from a fallen tree on 9/11, takes it up on eagle's wings to Iraq, to transplant and graft new roots of freedom into a captive ancient land, to raise and transplant an eagle's heart into the old roots of Babylon. And the devil is enraged with this bush. In order to perfectly match Daniel's prophecies, Christ waited for the eagles to arrive at the Trade Center, matching the book of Exodus, where he brought his people by a burning bush upon eagle's wings unto himself.